As to the specific statement that St. Alban was the patron of Masons, that he exercised the government of a chief over the craft, and improved their condition by augmenting their wages, we may explain this as the expression of a symbolical idea in which history is not altogether falsified, but only its dates and personages confused. Carusius, the legend does not mention by name. It simply refers to some king of England, of whose household St. Alban was the steward. Carusius assumed the imperial purple in the year in which St. Alban suffered martyrdom. The error of making him the patron of St. Alban is not, therefore, to be attributed to the legendist, but to Dr. Anderson, who first perpetrated this chronological blunder in the second edition of his constitutions. And though he states that this is asserted by all the old copies of the constitutions, footnote, Anderson, Constitutions, second edition, page 57. We fail to find it in any that are now extant. This legend of St. Alban, as it has been called, is worthy of a farther consideration. The foundation of this symbolical narrative was first laid by the writer of the Cook manuscript, or rather, copied by him from the tradition existing among the craft at that time. Its form was subsequently modified and the details extended in the Dowland manuscript, for tradition always grows in the progress of time. This form and these details were preserved in all the succeeding manuscript constitutions until they were still further altered and enlarged by Anderson, Preston, and other Masonic historians of the last century. With the gratuitous accretions of these later writers, we have no concern in any attempted explanation of the actual signification of the legend. Its true form and spirit are to be found only in the Dowland manuscript of the middle of the 16th century, and in those which were copied from it up to the Papworth at the beginning of the 18th. To these, and not to anything written after the period of the revival, we must direct our attention. Admitting that on the conquest of England by the Roman power, the architects who had accompanied the victorious legions introduced into the conquered colony their architectural skill, it is very likely that some master workmen among them had been more celebrated than others for their skill, and, indeed, it is naturally to be supposed that to such skillful builders control of the craft must have been confided. Whether there were one or more of these chief architects, St. Alban, if not actually one of them, was, by the lapse of time and the not unusual process by which legendary or oral accretions are superimposed on a plain historical fact, adopted by the legendists as their representative. Who was the principal patron of the architects or masons during the time of the colonization of England by the Romans is not so material as is the fact that architecture, with other branches of civilization, was introduced at that era into the island by its conquerors. This is an historical fact, and in this point the legend of the craft agrees with authentic history. But it is also an historical fact that when, by the pressure of the northern hordes of barbarians upon Rome, it was found necessary to withdraw all the legions from the various colonies which they protected from exterior enemies and restrained from interior insurrection, the arts and sciences, and among them architecture, began to decline in England. The natives, with the few Roman colonists who had permanently settled among them, were left to defend themselves from the incursions of the Picts on the north and the Danish and Saxon pirates in the east and south. The arts of civilization suffered a depression in the tumult of war. Science cannot flourish amid the clang and clash of arms. This depression and suspension of all architectural progress in England, which continued for some centuries, is thus expressed in the quaint language of the legend. Right soon after the decease of St. Alban, there came diverse wars into the realm of England of diverse nations, so that the good rule of Masonry was destroyed unto the time of King Ethelstan's days. There is far more of history than of fiction in this part of the legend. The next point of the legend of the craft to which our attention is to be directed is that which relates to the organization of Masonry at the city of York in the 10th century. This part of the legend is of far more importance than any of those which have been considered. The prehistoric here verges so closely upon the historic period that the true narrative of the rise and progress of Masonry cannot be justly understood until each of these prehistoric and historic elements has been carefully relegated to its appropriate period. This will constitute the subject matter of the next chapter.